You know, not long ago, I'll be specific, 1961, the birth control pill was created. In that particular year and for a little while afterwards, doctors prescribed birth control pills to married women only. Well, it was to control birth, right? Yes, temporarily. The idea then was, of course, that single women were maidens. Isn't that nice? Yes, there were no single girls before 1961 who had ever become knocked up, were there? Well, of course there were. Let's not be silly about that. But we wanted them to retain their virtue. And so we wanted to make it as, well, dangerous as possible, I suppose, for them to engage in relations. So, early on, the pill was used as a hot-button issue by conservatives. And it was used to convince you that, well, frankly, birth control of this sort was dangerous. Yes. I mean, we can't exactly go running around letting 15-year-olds take the pill. If we do, the next thing you know, they'll all be having sex. Yeah. Well, I hate to tell you this, but they did it anyways, with or without the pill. And some of them were, well, unlucky enough to become pregnant in the process. We didn't stop. No, we kept right on going. Now, you're going to say, oh, well, abortions are bad and evil. Well, that's a hot-button issue for you, isn't it? That's a social conservative issue. But I got to say, there's social conservatism and there's economic conservatism, and the people who call themselves socially conservative are anything but conservative when it comes to money. What? Well, okay. Let me put it to you like this. Imagine that you're running a big company, and I come to you with a piece of software, and that software is going to make your life and your company easier. Your job will be easier. Your engineers' jobs will be easier. The product will be made in less time, more accurately, and you can do the whole thing inside a box. Now, let me give you a real life, for instance, of how that's been done. Back in the mid-60s, Boeing decided it was going to build an aircraft unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, and they called it the 747. The jumbo jet. It was by far the biggest aircraft ever designed. That carried 325 people, I think. Well, the folks at Boeing were doing everything on paper back then. They had probably access to mainframes to do things like stress analysis, but when it came down to making the parts, there were no CAD systems. Those did not exist yet. So, bits and pieces were drawn and hand-drawn and redrawn and made sure that they all worked. And it took an enormous amount of power to do that with people and slide rules and T-squares and drawing boards. And the expression back to the drawing board was as common as all get out, because you frequently were back to the drawing board. Now, in the meantime, we've come along and we've created this thing which we call computer-aided drafting, which allows us now to create three-dimensional objects in it. And you can get that for your home PC and it costs you nothing. Wow, that's pretty astonishing, but it's true. And it's accurate. The interesting thing about this is that there isn't a business around today that doesn't embrace what makes it more profitable. At all. Not a chance. Because if they do, there's a couple of outcomes. One of them is that someone else is going to beat their pants off economically, and they're going to be left holding the bag for a relatively expensive service that nobody wants. Or someone else is going to come along just in their backyard, set up the same shop, do exactly the same service for a tenth or a quarter or half, whatever, some fraction of the price, and put the other guy out of business because he didn't embrace the technology. Now, new technologies like this do come along in leaps and bounds, and we're not foreign to us. And it's not just electronics, good heavens. In 1947, owning a freight-carrying aircraft was an unusual thing. There were no giant aircraft back then. They were starting to be built, though. And so, what I'm trying to tell you is that No matter how socially conservative you are, you're not holding back the economic side of things. You're looking forward to it. You might say that you don't want mifegamycin, a 2-pill solution to an abortion, because it offends you morally. But it doesn't offend you morally very much when something is genetically modified, like canola seeds. It costs maybe twice as much and gives you 10 times the yield. You would have to have rocks in your head not to want to buy it for a little bit more money and get a lot more back. So, the issue is not whether or not you're conservative, because most of you are not. Most of you embrace what is change for your sake, readily. But you get sucked in to social conservative arguments, which are primarily irrelevant to what's going on around you. Today, in 2021, nobody's worried about whether or not married ladies should be allowed to have the pill, and only married ladies. That's why we have families, and have had for 2 or 3 generations, where we don't have 20 kids, we have 2 or 3, because we've learned how to control ourselves and our bodies with medications and a variety of other things. So, cast off the idea that you're a social conservative as well, because you're probably really not. You've accepted a lot of change, and there's more to come. My name's Pat Stewart. I'm not deluded into thinking I am a conservative, so I never vote for that party. And really